Welcome back to Lunchtime BABLing. My name is Shea Brown. I'm the CEO of BABL AI, a company that audits algorithms for bias, ethical risk, and effective governance. Joined once again for what's becoming a kind of regular thing, having Bryan and Jeffery on. Thanks for coming, guys. To this episode is kind of nice. It's the last one of the year. This is sort of I think we want to do a little bit of a roundup of 2024, and 2024 was big year. Well, big year for the world, really, but big year for BABL, big year for responsible AI, big year for algorithmic auditing, and so I think we should just go around and talk about kind of what are the things that stood out to us. Is a good way to approach it. I don't know who wants to go first. Maybe I'll call on Jeffery.
Yeah, thanks. And love coming on these. I will say before we jump in, I want to give a couple of some updates. So one, I'm going to be hosting a new online course, an introduction to responsible AI course. So it should be live when this recording goes up. I'm going to be offering it for free until I think January 13th. So if you want to learn some more, you want to get on that, there'll be certification badges at the end for completion. I'll do a live lecture, I think also on the 13th as well. So it could be a nice Q&A session. If anyone's interested in joining that, feel free. We'll put a link in the comments. And I think this format also has been quite a success. I think people like it. I think we kind of like it. We'll keep it coming. But I know, and Shea knows that, but the audience doesn't know yet, that you have quite a few interviews coming up on Lunchtime BABLing in the near future. So you won't be seeing us quite as regular, maybe. Maybe it'll be like an every other type thing. But I know some exciting people are coming on to speak. So I know I'm very much looking forward to that and a lot of the interesting topics that'll come up. But back to the topic. 2024, a year in review for AI governance, responsible AI. There's so much to talk about. I know one thing I want to say for sure. Since OpenAI came out, I feel like on a high level, people are expecting some type of like AI bubble to pop, some type of the talk to go down, innovation to go down, the hype to kind of go down. And maybe it's because we're in the AI space and we see all of these tools and we work with all of these companies. I personally just don't feel that. I feel like it's bigger than ever. There's just so much going on, and I think a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about, which is reactions to trends in the market, it might be perceived good or bad depending on who you are. But in general, I feel like AI is kind of just exploding right now, and people are still in the hype of trying to figure out where to put it, how it works, how to implement. So maybe kind of start with that and throw it back to you guys, see what you think. Feel free to disagree.
What do you think, Brett?
Yeah, AI is pretty exciting stuff in the business world. I think it's the topic of every conversation I get into, and I'm seeing it more in everyday kind of uh, application. So this is interesting. I went to a doctor's appointment yesterday, and I had to sign a waiver that they would be using AI to summarize the doctor's notes. And this is really funny to me. So naturally, I'm just like, I'll go up and ask the receptionist. I'm like, so what AI are you using? And they had no idea. They couldn't tell me. Eventually, I think they mentioned Copilot or something along these lines. I'm like, okay, well, at least the staff knows what's going on, right? So we'll talk a little bit about education and training, but what an interesting thing. They have policies, they have documents, and the staff have no idea what exactly is going on. So it's interesting that it's now getting into operational workflows in larger organizations. But over the course of 2024, from my point of view, I just think that the decision making, the procedures, the policies, these types of things are just maturing, relatively quickly across all organizations. People are figuring things out. They're allocating budgets, so it's becoming more of what you would traditionally find within an organizational, line item budgeting and practices, and being put in application. So that's interesting and cool to see, especially for what we do, and how that will ultimately, it's on a time cycle. But yeah, the market is definitely maturing, and just going to continue. So it's here.
I'd love to know more about that tool. That is like a very high risk situation.
Yeah, well, I think this is the trend. Like we are seeing from our perspective as auditors, many more systems that we audit are based on large language models. That's just a fact. And there are more situations than before. So coming into 2024, I would say that, maybe one or two of the systems that we audited had some elements of large language models associated with it. And others were just sort of standard decision making, machine learning, advanced stuff, but didn't involve large language models. And now I would say almost every conversation we have and every company we work with currently, large language models are a central part of the AI that they use. And it's because of how easy they are to use. And it also has changed the nature of the kinds of audits we do. And so, in the spirit of kind of talking about 2024, entering 2024, we were primarily focused on, high risk hiring decision type algorithms that we're auditing. And across 2024, we have slowly been sort of accruing different kinds of audits that require different sorts of assessments. And it is driven by large language models where people are just coming up with new ways of incorporating them into their operational workflow, into their decision making. And the other trend that went along with that is that enterprises were starting to ask tough questions. And therefore, the vendors, the producers of these systems had to come up with good answers. And oftentimes that involved some third party assurance or evaluation of those systems. And so it's moving at lightning speed. And I think everybody is trying to reap the benefit of these systems, and not all of the various things that you need to maturely do that are coming along with the ride. So like informing employees the right, to the level that they need to be informed about how the systems are being used is a great example of that. And so it's going into 2025. I think we're going to just see that rapidly accelerate. And we've already seen it in our deal flow in terms of who we're talking to and what kind of engagements we're gearing up for 2025. It's a lot around how are companies managing the risks of their internal use for various reasons of large language models. And agents are going to be part of that as well. So anyway, that's sort of my take on that particular thing.
For sure. And that kind of echoes a trend I think we want to talk on, and that is education. So, and Bryan, a perfect analogy to start off this conversation. High risk situation, high stakes, very personal, affects everybody. But also from, say, a company's perspective, you're now having like industry specific risk associated, whether you're like in medical, financial services, hiring, whatever it is. Everyone's kind of got industry specific concerns that they might have, or legal challenges they might need to get through. And then we're putting through, a lot of chatbots. We're seeing it a lot, right? Or some type of note taker or some type of AI assistant trying to augment a lot of the busy work, right? But Bryan, you have this perfect analogy there of you ask some probably very simple questions about the tool, and that first person that you're talking to, that first interaction, the face of the company, if you will, has no answers for it, right? And I think a trend that we're starting to see for sure, partly because a huge component of our business is education, is, and I say this phrase all the time, there's a race for competency, right? So one, you want to just kind of understand how to assess these tools, how to evaluate these tools, how to procure these tools, minimize your risk, try and figure out the legal landscape of these tools, all these different things. And you might come from a legal background, but you don't have understand the the math behind evaluating these tools, right? Or you were an engineer and you might not understand that those soft skills and understanding how to assess the risk related to those tools, whatever it may be, or you're somebody on the front just kind of informing a customer, hey, this tool is being used, right? So I think there is this race to people just trying to wrap their head around all of this stuff from every level, right? How to answer these very simple questions to how to do very complex problem solving to make sure your tools are safe and compliant and all of this stuff. I don't know, what do you guys think?
Well, I think
Go ahead.
it's how do I want to respond? I'd say that it's clearly a need within the deployment of AI within organizations, right? We talk a lot about governance structures and policies and like the ethical side of things, but the application of new technology within a business isn't new. When you think about all the different things that have come prior to AI in terms of technology, like training your staff on what the tools, the technology, what's happening within your organization, it's going to be more under a microscope. I think in terms of a technology, AI is going to be the most scrutinized technology in the history of humans, right? There's just at this point, it's all going to be AI for tech. It seems like I don't know what else would be beyond it, but maybe we'll figure it out someday. So we have to just do the basics. Like businesses have to just do the basics to roll out new technology. If your staff is having people sign contracts or documents and they ask a basic question or two and they don't have the slightest clue of what's going on, and literally I had to like tell them, I ask them, is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Oh, I think I've heard that. Okay, well then I assume it's that. So like this is where you lose brand trust. And we've talked about trust a lot, but like I understand AI pretty darn well, but I'm in it was a hospital system, and these elderly people aren't as high as familiar with the tech. Like they're gonna have no idea, they're not gonna trust it. They ask a question from somebody, I don't want to use that. So then as an organization, you're limiting your ability to use the technology because the customers don't even feel trustworthy to say yes, you can do that. So at the end of the day, there's just a lot that's going to continue to evolve, and everybody will get better iteratively. It's an obvious thing. That's just how things progress. But I thought it was interesting, and I just saw some very basics, frontline training gaps, and heck, there's a lot that we could do there for a lot of folks. So just something business leaders need to always be thinking about is how is this going to be received by your customer? Because certainly, I signed no. They couldn't.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, how's that? So they don't get my data to use to train the model or anything like that.
This in itself is a whole conversation.
Yeah, we don't need to hijack the whole recap on my one visit to the doctor yesterday, but it was very funny to me. I got a good giggle out of it.
But that consent thing is a big thing. You've hit two chords with me with what you said. So the first one, for those that don't know, I've created this new series, BABL Bites. It's on TikTok and Instagram and all that kind of short form thing to keep you informed. But the first one that kind of just shot up was around the TSA and their facial recognition software. And comments that kept coming through was, I didn't know I could opt out of that, right? And even though there's signs in different places and all of this stuff, but that's very simple, coaching, whether it's to your staff, to your customers, that's pretty low hanging fruit. But I don't think most people know when AI is being used or what risk might be associated to them personally. I had another one recently talking about, and I'll get into some of these details later, but I posted one recently about the UK government was using a tool to try and address welfare fraud and trying to identify welfare fraud within the system. And there was bias in this. And I got this, Shea, you posted this on LinkedIn. This is where I found this. And the comments were overwhelmingly, there was clearly an ignorance in terms of people's understanding of AI bias, right? We see this all the time, actually, in terms of what people think bias is. It's like, oh, it's identifying something that's already there, or it's trying to, you're looking in the right place and that's why it's happening, or there's just a general, lack of understanding of what this actually means and how it can actually harm, the average person unintentionally. And again, I guess that goes back to education. I'm kind of going on a rant. Shea, what do you
Yeah,
got?
yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think education is going to be key for this whole ecosystem, all the way from general workforce to people who are impacted communities and individuals, to this, the board level, C-suite, and policymakers. Like, there's a significant lack of understanding generally around what are these systems, what can they do, where are they being used, what are the risks associated with it, and what can I, in my role, whatever that may be, do about it. And so that's where we've seen a lot of interest. That's part of what happened in 2024 for BABL, is that we saw overwhelmingly, what started out as like a little training program to train and certify auditors that work with us, just to make sure that we had the best, turned into a thing that everybody wanted and everybody needed. And everybody means people from the big four, law firms, regulators, uh, people transitioning into this industry. And now we've sort of pushed out, I think, that some general workforce and general, I'd say the bias course that Jeffrey did, very well suited for concerned citizens, people who want to advocate and understand this. We have a general workforce AI literacy course, which we developed, that was more focused on the business side, to try to get people like that Jeffrey was talking, that Bryan was talking to sort of understand, roughly how these systems work and what their role is in mitigating potential risk for the company and for individuals. And that's just going to continue, and it goes both ways. We've seen over the years, that over this year, that we've been training more and more people in that kind of specialized general, like, auditor risk management layer, where people need to know quite a bit. But there is much, much more, both up in terms of specialization, and then down in terms of general workforce. There's so much more that needs to get built, because there are so many new regulations, there are so many new risks, and the systems themselves are proliferating. AI agents were not a thing that you would expect to encounter on the job, and now people are using them. They're sort of an integral part of Copilot, for instance. And so, we're just going to see this grow more and more.
Yeah, for sure.
I
Yeah, Bryan, you
I
got
think that
something?
I think for us, and what we're working to try to do, with respect to mitigating bias and ethical risk and all these other things, agents are going to be really, really, I think, a sexy thing for businesses in 2025 to employ. I mean, I can get an agent who can do all this stuff, basic, level, work function for, $8 an hour. I've seen models where they're, you get highly specialized trained, nurses for like $12 an hour, but they're AI agents, right? So just the amount of risk that puts on your organization. I mean, there's lawsuits out on this one already, that have been won
Yeah.
inside of like, oh, well, the agent is your employee. You're 100% responsible for whatever outcome that agent states to your customers. I think it's going to create a ton of risk. There'll be a ton of exciting stories for us to talk about next year with AI agents. And at the same time, it's a super cool tool for businesses to use if they do it right. It can really optimize some things that are kind of boring, redundant, and very specialized kind of little roles within organizations that, like, customers need answers to basic things over and over and over and over again. That's great use for an agent. Like, nobody wants to do that job. So like, I'm pro them, but it's going to absolutely like cause someone a big mess next year. So
Yeah.
that's going to be a bet for me in 2025. We'll see an agent big issue next year.
You said it really well there too. If you do it right, right? I think everybody can agree that like AI is this great tool and it can get rid of a lot of these menial tasks, but doing it right is correct. And this is probably a good segue into one of my things I think is a huge highlight from the last year is just this regulatory wave that has come. Um, so just to my first thought on this in terms of these bots, for instance, is the FTC is started this initiative, Operation AI Comply, I think is what it's called. And basically, they're going for companies that are producing these tools and going after misleading marketing and making claims about their tools capabilities and whether or not they're actually executing on those abilities. And that would be a good one, right? So if you have an AI bot that's doing your sale, helping your sales or your customer service, or it's trying to identify, a reoccurring thief in your retailer, whatever it may be. Is it actually doing that accurately? Is it failing to do those things? Is it giving the wrong information? Well, now you got the FTC that's going to come in and probably put some big fines in, and your clients will be able to get out of their contracts, and they are at risk of lawsuits and all of these things. So, yeah, just in general, to to segue into this is for me the biggest takeaway 2024 without question is all of these AI regulations that have come along. And I think the big ones you can kind of throw out really quick. Everybody's aware of the EU AI Act. It's going to have a massive implication on. It's going to have a global impact, right? It's going to follow GDPR and a lot of these. What is it? The Brussels effect is what they call it, where it starts there, but it has this global impact. But then you got United States has a number of things that they put through, like the Colorado law that went through the AI Act in Colorado, and then a lot of industry specific laws. And this is where it kind of gets it's almost impossible to keep up. You got the insurance law in Colorado. You have the facial recognition law in Illinois. Texas has a data protection law. There's like a dozen states that have deep fake laws. The acting industry has multiple laws now around AI and data collection and likeness use for actors. You have the Elvis Act in Tennessee, also around deep fakes and likeness. Utah's AI law, and then ton a ton of proposed laws and EU AI Act copycats that are likely in the way. Canada, South Korea is right now, they're in like the final stages prior to a vote on a similar law. Japan's got something that they're looking at. Singapore, we've heard word that not Pakistan, India is trying to figure out what they're going to do. Pretty much any country you can think of. Turkey has got a bunch of stuff that they're trying to evaluate right now. Australia, any country you can think of is trying to figure out how are we going to regulate and manage these. And even if you're in the U.S. and you're like, we're going in a different route, like I said before, there's just this web of state laws that are coming around. So regulation is on the horizon for AI. And I think it's going to be very painful for companies, especially if you're coming from a space like that just hasn't been regulated very, very highly. And it's going to be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is the nightmare for companies, and especially multinational corporations, is this sort of proliferation of rules and regulations. And it's something that like some companies, like insurance companies in the US, had to deal with this because every state is run by their insurance commissioner and things. So some and banking and financial services have had to deal with this. And now everybody who has a startup that has an AI focused feature, they now are in the crosshairs for exactly this kind of regulatory sprawl. And the answer for that is, well, I think what we're seeing is the answer for most people is let's find the most stringent and the most sort of cross-cutting type controls to put in place for compliance that are going to get us the 95% of the way. And then the 5% we worry about on a case-by-case basis. And that's exactly why a lot of people have come to us, because, on the research side of what Babel does, we really care about AI governance and what is effective. And when we talk about effectiveness at mitigating risks, Babel's mission is really focused on the individual impact to society. However, we can't ignore regulatory and liability risk and so forth. And so we do focus on what are the controls that you can put in place that are going to give you the coverage that minimize those risks. And I think this year has been a crazy one for that too, because we've seen, as you pointed out, EU AI Act is driving the charge. That's where most people are worried about, because the fines are massive, and they know, we've seen that the EU is not afraid of levying, multi-million to billion-dollar fines, and the requirements are super, super tough. Now, the problem is that the standards around that it's such a mess, and standards organizations are struggling to do that. And another big thing that emerged out of this is ISO 42001 as a trend. It's the kind of first standard that emerged out of the chaos, so to speak, as a thing that is people are starting to accept as, this is a great starting point for compliance towards the EU AI Act. And I think I'm expecting, if I were to bet on it, like Bryan here, what's going to be happening, I think on the standard space, I think that 42001 will be the go-to standard for 2025, where people are going to prepare for the 2026 EU regulation cutoff for most systems by implementing 42001 as a starting point in 2025. And I think we're planning on that from a business perspective, from an education perspective, and also from a research perspective, like figuring out exactly what kind of controls in that standard are the ones to work on. And so I'm excited to see how it plays out. But it's a very different landscape. Going into 2024, people just kind of threw up their hands like, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And now I think we have a much clearer idea how this is going to play out. Unfortunately, it's going to be complicated, and businesses are going to have to change the way they work. But at least we have some idea, and I think there's a directionality to the industry where people can actually hitch their wagon to something that's going to be actually accepted by a lot of people.
Let me ask you this. So we often say this phrase, like, you got to find that North Star to get to. And we often use the EU AI Act because it is so big. If you think ISO 42001 is kind of going to be that first big, shift, what are like four things you can think of that companies need to at least consider or start preparing for or start educating themselves for, in anticipation of that?
So, to be honest, like, I think that we have identified in our audit structure, the way we conduct assurance engagements, there's sort of like three pillars, and they're centered around risk assessment and mitigation, but assessment as a primary mechanism, governance, and by governance we mean having some accountability structures, some committees, responsible parties that are overseeing things in a documented way. That's important. And then some kind of technical testing regime. So if I have an AI system, either I'm using it as a deployer or I'm producing it, I have to be able to show me the numbers. I think you got to show numbers to people, internally and potentially externally. What are you measuring? How is it related to risk? And those three pillars are going to get you, in terms of substantively, like what is actually mitigating risk. Those three pillars get you very deep into 42001 preparation. And they also apply very directly to the EU AI Act. And they're the toughest to implement in the right way. And so start with the things that are most germane to mitigating risk and the most difficult. And if you tackle those and you can get those done, then everything else is basically, I wouldn't say basically, it's a bookkeeping exercise for compliance. But those are the three things that if you get right, you're in really good shape.
Let me ask a quick follow-up. and either of you feel free to answer this, because I think you probably both have your own response. But so, especially in the compliance space, because of the pains and the fees and the the costs to do these things and the hurdles, and especially in new compliance, I think things have a tendency to get pushed off internally, right? Where it gets put under one person, but then it's like, but to actually get to compliance, to get uh, to do these things, there tends to be, some pushback or some delays, or we'll wait for 2025, whatever it is. So say somebody's watching this early Q1 and they're seeing the writing on the wall and they want to get their organization ready for the EU AI Act, and they're listening to this advice and thinking, okay, I want to do ISO 42001. What advice would you give them to kind of get the ball rolling internally?
So short answer is executive buy-in. I mean, that's the answer for anything that has to do with spending money and human capital to do something in a company. Executive buy-in, because we've seen the other way around. You come in somewhere lower on the chain where people are really well intentioned and it doesn't ever get off the ground. So get the executives to care. Now, if you're an executive and you have that capacity, I mean, the short answer is get help. I mean, I think selfishly, it's not selfish. I think contact a company like BABL, right? Because we've done this before, and it's not like you don't have to contact BABL. Contact somebody else if you want. Find somebody who's done it before, actually, and understands what are the key things you need to do, because you want that shortcut, because you can spin your wheels really quickly. And so what you want is like, what's the shortest path to getting where we need to be? And so the short answer is those three things I mentioned. Get those off the ground, at least on paper. And then contact somebody like us and say, okay, this is what we've done for 2 months now. What do we need to do to get this from point A to point B? Where point B is we're ready for, let's say, ISO 42001 certification, which is going to help you in many, many ways, right? We have a very structured process to do that. Like, there is a structured process. We can take you from A to B. We can tell you exactly where you're missing things. These are not hard things. It's just you need clarity and you need people who have done it before. I think that's my short answer.
So I'm just, Ryan, did you have more?
One little bit.
Go for it.
Earlier, gap analysis makes a lot of sense. We have a lot of clients who are contacting us saying, we see what we need to do, but we really don't know how to do it. Everything you were just saying, Shea. And we start with the gap analysis, and we're able to just kind of identify the things that are, hey, this is all right, this is a weak spot, this is more of what your focus needs to be. And I think the gap analysis is for organizations who just truly a first starting point. And I smirked when you asked the question. I'm like, well, call me, please. That would be a great way to start any of those conversations. But yeah, I think a gap analysis is a great starting point, and that's kind of the beginning of that entire engagement. So anywhere along those lines, you can reach out to us. We're happy to, even if you've done everything, just call us and we'll do the audit. But we can help so much further up in the decision-making process. And we got a lot of good stuff there. So I'll beat it to death.
That was great. We try. Yeah. Love the comments. I'm just kind of looking at time right now. How about we end it with each one of us kind of says, what is, from looking back at 2024, what is your biggest takeaway? And then a follow-up, what is the thing you're most excited for going into 2025? Shea, you want to start it off?
So let me clarify. Do you want takeaways from the BABL perspective, or like from globally?
Whatever makes sense.
All right, I'm going to go real personal and do the BABL perspective. My most excited takeaway from the thing that I took away from 2024 and that I was most kind of proud of and excited about is seeing our AI and algorithm auditors certification students starting to really take our methodology into where they work, either getting jobs, which is exciting, but the ones that are working in organizations, taking the methodology and applying it in organizations and coming to us for help if they need it. That's happened a lot this year, and it's super gratifying to me personally to see that our methodologies, which spent a lot of time developing and perfecting, getting out there. And I think that that's very exciting for me. And for 2025, I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is to really see the the education, and again, from personal perspective, to see our education get out there even more. And I think reaching more people faster and at higher quality, like, I'm super excited about that. And I think that's the prerequisite for the 2026, us getting and really dominating the audit space. I think that's for me, that's my drive. 2025 is priming everybody to do the right thing, and 2026 is like, okay, let's come get those assurance engagements and prove to everybody else that you're doing the right thing.
I think that was dead on. I'm gonna take a different angle though. 2024, I think about always, what's going on with the businesses that we're talking to. Oh man, at the beginning of the year, nobody knew anything. They were asking incredibly basic questions that were super valid then. But I do think that the market has matured considerably. There's been a lot of effort put in by a ton of researchers and to make information available. So many conferences, so many speakers, so much engagement on learning about the technology. So I know I started off by saying like, hey, we're not doing the basics, but like the effort going in and the maturity that's happened over this year is significant leap, and that's awesome. I think from an innovation standpoint, from an ethical, responsible AI standpoint, there are better North Stars. There are more structured approaches, and I think that's what we need to continue to strive for. So I look for more of that into 2025 by way of education, just more industry innovation and all those things. So that's interesting to me for 2024, and hopefully what I see into 2025. I'm going to toss something out that is just like fun to me to think about for next year. It has very little to do with us, but I'd love to be the company that provides assurance around however this plays out. So, with all the AI agents and the solutions that come up, I think of like transactions, like how are transactions being handled by these AI agents, and what Trump's going to do with the eliminating tax for crypto. I think we're going to see some AI crypto agent transactions, and I would love for Babel to be on that job. That'll be fun to see, but that's going to be my bank shot prediction for 2025. We'll see some crypto AI agent collaboration out there. So yeah, plus education, right? Know all the things.
I like that curveball.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Brian's very loves the crypto game and posts about it sometimes on LinkedIn. So give him a follow. I think I'll echo some of the things you guys said. My biggest takeaway from 24 is just the global regulatory response. It's touching pretty much every inch of the planet. There's someone on LinkedIn, Raymond Sun, I think is his name. He's got this website, techieray.com, that tracks global AI regulations. I'll put it in make sure it's in the handle. But you just click on any country and you can kind of see it's hitting everywhere. And that's incredible to me. And a lot of the similar beats in terms of what they're looking for. In terms of 25, what's I'm most looking forward to would be, I'll say from a personal standpoint, I think I'm going to try and get out of my shell a lot more, make a handful of courses, do a lot more speaking engagements, and just kind of, on that education point, do the best I can to get out there. So on that note, if you want to sign up for my free responsible AI course, well, temporarily free, please enroll. And maybe we can have a chat.
You were out on the speaking circuit this year, and you got out there a few different times, so you're well ahead of the curve, buddy.
I'm growing it.
Yep, exactly. And yeah, I think that's a great place to stop. I'm very excited for 2025. Also anxious in a lot of ways, but excited, I think, for the opportunity and to see what happens. So if you are listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. If you are watching us on YouTube, give us a like and a subscribe. That really helps a lot. And we're going to catch you again next year on Lunchtime Babbling.